Hey guys, what is up? SuperKmanrocks here, and I'm here finally with my first weekly review and analysis of the 2022 Spring Split. It is for LPL Week 1, which just wrapped up. Obviously, 7 days of LPL action to go over in this video, so I don't want this intro to take too much time because I've got a lot of series to cover. First and foremost, if you guys are interested in weekly recaps for all the major regions, please go ahead and leave a like. It'll let me know that you guys want to see more of this kind of content for the other regions as well. But we're going to go ahead and jump right into LPL Week 1. We're going to go day by day, talking about every single series, my thoughts on it. I'm going to give a player of the series, a dud of the series, and then at the end of the day, I will give a player of the week and also a dud of the week. But jumping right into our first series of the year, it was OMG taking on TT Gaming, ThunderTalk Gaming, in a very, very decisive OMG win here in 2 games. Obviously, for those who watch Western League of Legends, LPL is best of 3. And so on the screen, I have listed their combined scores from those 2 games. If it were 3 games, I would have combined scores for the 3 games. Just in case you're wondering, I don't remember a game where, Cream went 13-1-7. That's just his combined record from games 1 and 2. But, yeah, a very, very solid win here for OMG. Game 1 was a little bit interesting. Early game was kind of all TT's bot lane. Southwind with some really, really solid plays early on Thresh. Thresh is one of Southwind's champions, really his only champion. And so he does get that in game 1 and is able to do a lot of good things in lane against Abel and Cold, who did look a little bit susceptible to some hard engages. They were out of position a couple times. So Southwind with some good plays in game 1, but as the mid game rolled on, really the big difference in this series kind of started to show, and that was the top side of this map. Shanji, Aki, and Cream really just absolutely took over in this series. Aki had a fantastic game 1 on the Jarvan. He was my player of the game in game 1. He really just kind of took over the map, was everywhere that he needed to be. Really just was making plays top to bottom, really, and controlling the map, I think, is really the big part. Game 2 is really where it became the Shanji and New storyline. Game 2, I'm really glad we got it so early in the season, but Game 2 really was a PSA for an anti-bullying campaign, because that's exactly what happened to New in Game 2. By 13 minutes in the game, he was being repeatedly proxy farmed and dove under his tier 2 tower. The Rumble absolutely obliterating the Gangplank. There was almost nothing he could do. He ended up, I think, with like 10 or so deaths in that game. Not a good look for New. He's going to be my dud of the series here. He got abused, especially in Game 2, but even in Game 1, he died top lane in a situation where he absolutely didn't need to, trying to fight 1v3 on the Jax. And so, just not a great look overall for New. He's definitely a contender for dud of the week in the entire LPL. And on the flip side, I think Shanji's definitely a contender for surprise of the week and maybe even player of the week in the LPL. He looked really, really good on the Gwen going into late game. He actually got dove 1v3 similarly to how New got dove 1v3 in that game 1, but survived, almost got 2 kills out of it. And then in game 2, he just obliterated. He absolutely obliterated New on the Rumble. So Shanji is going to be my player of the series here at the very least. Could have gone to Aki for his game on the Jarvan. He had a really good game on Xin Zhao as well, if not just spending it most of it top lane. And then Cream played really, really well, especially on the Corki in game 2. The bot lane I'm a little bit worried about. They weren't, stellar. Cold got caught a little bit more than I would have liked. He was a little bit concerning, but Cold kind of does that. And then on the TT side, nobody really stood out. Captain did virtually nothing in these games other than just try to put a band-aid on top lane. Frigid was just not as good as Aki. Aki had pretty much perma jungle control the entire game. A lot of that was due to pushing lanes, but bot lane was doing really well for TT, and even then, Frigid didn't have a ton of river control on bot side. But yeah, like I said, bot lane was winning early. Southwind on the Thresh looked pretty good. They looked a lot less good on the Ziggs Leona, which I guess is to be expected. It's not their playstyle really at all, but a positive takeaway for TT would be how well they did with the Aphelios and Thresh. But overall, a really, really solid win for OMG. They had a really, really good week here. TT did not. A little small spoiler alert. This was just kind of a precursor as to what would come for both teams. Moving on to the second series of day one, that was FunPlus Phoenix taking on Royal Never Give Up. And this was a battle between two teams that definitely have a lot more expectations than the first teams, and it was really, really, really close. Game one was probably the least close of the three games. Game one really was LWX and Hang versus the world. And you could kind of classify a lot of the series as LWX and Hang versus the world. But game one especially, I mean, that Jinx really, really went off in game one. It was really tough to take down. Xiaohu got a solo kill on Gory early, and that was a sentence we'd be saying, I believe a couple times in the series. Xiaohu just kind of dominated Gory in the mid lane. It's not super usual for me to give out a dud of the series to somebody on the winning team. In fact, I've already wrapped up what I'm going to be doing for the LCK and the LEC as well, but this is the only time in anybody's week one that I gave the dud of the series to somebody on the winning side, and Gory, I think, unfortunately deserved it. His laning phase was really bad, and I know Gory's never really been known for his laning phase. He's always been much more of a scaler, a team fighter, and he did some team fighting in this series, but even so, I think he was probably the biggest detriment to his team of anybody in this, out of these two teams. Everybody on RNG kind of played relatively well. It was just a really well-played series by, specifically the bot lane, and then at parts by the top and jungle as well for FPX. But, yeah, game one was pretty close. Pretty much just decided by how strong the Jinx got, and they just couldn't stop her. She was just taking over the game at that point. Beishuan did lose Baron, I believe, in game one. I know he lost Baron this series. I believe he lost Baron in game one. Kind of sus there, but, you know, it is what it is. Moving on to game two, the RNG win in this series, it was, I would say close. It shouldn't have been, though. It's actually game two, now that I'm thinking about it, that Beishuan stole the Baron, because RNG had a really, really comfortable lead in game two for a majority of the mid game, and then a Baron steal with an objective bounty got FPX right back even in terms of gold. So a little bit concerning that they were even giving up a 50-50 at that point in the game. They were up probably 4 or 5k gold in game two, so very, very disappointed to see RNG just kind of giving that up. Eventually, Gory gets caught in the top lane trying to shove a wave. Lux gets caught as well, Hang, I should say, and RNG is able to secure the win eventually. But it should have been much cleaner for RNG. And then we move on to game three, which was very close. At least every fight in this game was very close. Macro-wise, you could definitely say that FPX had a real advantage here, and this is where I think Beishuan really had his best game. And, you know, where he was a little bit kind of suspect in game one, and then had the big Baron steal in game two, but other than that, not too much. Game three on the Lee Sin was definitely a much bigger game for him. But even so, LWX is my player of the series here. He was phenomenal. He hard carried game one, and he was the damage in game three with their win. So, yeah, a really, really good series here from the FPX bottom lane. Kind of showing a lot of what they showed at Demacia Cup, which is this team is going to fight a lot, especially around objectives, and they're just really talented. I can't say it enough. This bot lane really might be the best bot lane, maybe outside of Viper and Mako in the LPL, and maybe even in the world. They are that mechanically good, and from what we've seen so far, both in Demacia Cup and now in, you know, the LPL week one, they are clicking on a really, really solid level here. So big props to the FPX bot lane. RNG played well as well. Xiaohu was kind of the big carry for RNG. No surprise there. We've been saying that for a long time. But Xiaohu did really, really well trying to get his team advantages. Wei kind of controlled the map early. He had a lot of early leads, but he kind of struggled later in the game at controlling everything. I guess that's kind of a jungle support thing, but Ming also played kind of well. Really, overall, I would just say really good series here by FPX. RNG was really, really close to taking this series and just barely didn't. I'm not going to punish them too much for that, but FPX is probably a better team than I think a lot of people are giving them credit for, if only solely because they're going to have one of the most volatile and scary bot lanes when it comes to not only lane, but team fighting in the entire world. And if Beishuan was really good here. If Clid can come in after, obviously, the quarantining period that he has to come in from Korea with, if Clid can come in here and be, you know, prime Clid and really, really change this team up, they absolutely could be an LPL title contender, and that's kind of what we're looking at right now with FPX. Moving on to game 3, the first game of day 2, or the first games of day 2, it was JD Gaming taking on EDG Edward Gaming, your reigning world champions, making their 2022 spring debut in a 2-0 win here for them. The series was a lot closer than I think 2 games, and especially like the times and the scores would let you believe. The first one absolutely was not. It was a giga stomp from EDG basically from moment 1. Other than a 2v2 kill in the bot lane for the JDG bot lane for LPC, who actually did have a very good series. LPC and 369, I think, were definitely the shining spots for JDG in the series. Outside of, an early kill for bot lane, this was all EDG, and it was all JJ. He was everywhere on the map. This is an example of what it looks like to just be jungle gapped. And not even jungle gapped, really jungle canyoned. Kanavi got here in game 1. It was not close. This game was over by 15 minutes, really with no chance of comeback, even with bot lane being kind of strong. It got to the point where there was nothing they could do. The Lee Sin was so big, the Rise was so big, they were everywhere. The Jhin eventually got big. It really just became, too much gold too fast. In game 1, it was not a close game there. In game 2, JDG actually had a lead, I think as late as like 25 minutes into the game. They were up 2k gold, and then they went for Baron, and they all died. They all died. They gave up Baron, they gave up Dragon, they gave up 2 towers, and then all of a sudden EG has a 3k gold lead in the game, is now pretty much over after JDG had been doing really, really well. 369 on the Kennen, playing your standard 369 game of going for those big plays. On the Kennen, he built full damage, as I think is pretty much common on the Kennen now, but basically played him like an assassin with flash, assassinating Viper and Scout whenever he could, and even Flandre, I think he killed a couple times as well. But let's talk about Flandre, because he played Annie and Vladimir, and that's insane, right? I mean, the Annie in game 1 was fine. I mean, it didn't really do anything. The Vladimir in game 2 was super effective. At basically doing what the Kennen does, but doing it safer, because the Kennen never built Zhonya's. They, 369, being 369, built full damage, and that worked. He got a lot of kills, he made a lot of plays, and LPC on the Samira was also pretty far ahead. He actually got a double kill pretty early in the game in a 2v2 bot lane. LPC and Missing in lane actually looked really, really strong here, but LPC and 369 were quite strong. But it just kind of got to the point where Flandre and everybody else, really, Viper got there as well, where he was just too strong. Not much to do. JJ is going to be my player of the series here. Pretty much complete jungle control here from JJ. There was almost no situation other than maybe like the first 15 minutes of game 2, where Kanavi really had a ton of control over objectives or anything like that. Kanavi is my dud of the series. 2 back-to-back games of Xin Zhao, 2 back-to-back games where he did almost nothing. Really, there was not a lot of good to say about Kanavi here. When you're talking about how Kanavi giveth and Kanavi taketh away, this is Kanavi at his absolute worst. And that's definitely concerning as a JDG fan, if you are one out there, but, you hope that he can turn it around, kind of get back closer to that 2020 form. But this was a lot closer to what we saw towards the end of 2021, where this team was not even a playoff team, so definitely concerning there. Good takeaways for JDG here would be 369 playing aggressive, playing his style, and LPC and Missing actually looking really solid in lane. Takeaways for EDG, JJ and Flandre look fantastic together. Scout was everywhere on the map, and then Viper, Viper and Mako, while their laning phase may have looked a little bit weaker than you would have hoped, Viper was just as deadly in team fights as he has always been. So pretty solid win here for EDG, and you're hoping that you can carry that momentum in. Obviously, JDG is not the scariest opponent. They're not one of the big teams, but even so, they're not some pushover team either. So a good barometer here, I think, for how good EDG will be going into spring was them kind of schlacking JDG. It looks like they're going to be just as good as they were last year. Moving on to the second series of day 2, and that was LGD taking on Anyone's Legend in what was objectively the most concise, most proactive, most, the highest level of thinking and league that really the world has ever seen here. Of course, I am joking. Anyone's Legend takes this absolute fiesta of a series 2-1. Wow. I don't know what to say. These two teams looked like the two worst teams in the LPL this series. Betty's gonna get my player of the series here. Betty was really the only player in this game, like, pretty much any team that I think wasn't, like, really running it. Xiao Hao had moments of, like, really, really solid play, and then also had moments where he would die for absolutely no reason at all. This is what League of Legends looks like at 2 a.m., when you're tired, you've played 14 games that day. I don't even know what else to say. This was an insane series. Betty looked pretty bad on the Ziggs, I will say, even as the player of the series. It was really the two Aphelios games in games 2 and 3, where Betty and Chocho looked a lot better. ZDZ also played pretty well on the Camille. I did like his Camille plays. Fearness looked good in game 1 on the Akali. And, by the way, it's Yeg, I believe, not Yeji. Power Rankings video, but Yeg here is gonna get my dud of the series. He looked okay in game 1 on the Victor, but really it was games 2 and 3 where he just wasn't all that good. You could give it to pretty much anybody in this entire series. You could give it to Shadow. I think Shadow deserved it, but he had a decent game 1 on the Xin Zhao. You could give it to Eric and Jin Zhao, who weren't super great. You know, it's really up to you. There could be a lot of people in this series that get the dud of the series. For me, it goes to Yeg, with Betty getting the player of the series, but neither of these teams really looking all that good in terms of the outlook. Game 1, like I said, was kind of cut and dry as an LGD win. They took way too long to close it out. Game 2 and 3 were also pretty cut and dry, but in a more spectacular manner, I would say. Anyone's Legend probably is the better team here. Not that that's saying much, but I don't think anybody is saying that either of these teams is going to be a playoff team after this series. Not a great look from either team. Really only a good look from Betty, and only really on the Aphelios, and only really late game, even then, in the team fights. So, kind of a gross series to watch, but if you like fiestas in pro play, I would recommend going to rewatch this series. It definitely lives up to that reputation. Moving on to day 3, and the first series of day 3 is actually probably our biggest upset of week 1, and that is going to be Rare Adam actually taking down Top Esports here in a 2-0 sweep. To start out the year, Top Esports, your Demacia Cup champions, of course, cursed here in week 1, as per usual. This was a really interesting series. Game 1 was rather close, but a couple of really small differences really made the difference. In that game, you could really talk about that jungle, mid, AD carry trio really being a problem for Top Esports. Tian actually, at multiple points in the series, Tian actually got quite abused. He is going to be my dud of the series, as you can see. That was more so obvious in game 1 for me, where Leon just had full jungle control pretty much for the entirety of the game. iBoy did really well on the Caitlyn. I'm a little bit concerned with the laning of iBoy and Zora, mostly because of Zora. Zora, you know, they won this series, and, you know, everything is all hunky-dory in Rare Adam's locker room right now, I'm sure, but Zora was definitely a little bit of a question mark for me in this series, especially in lane, getting caught out quite a few times, both on the Lux and then on the Leona, just dying when he didn't need to, but overall, Leon, Strive, and iBoy as a trio were really strong in this series and in game 1, especially. Game 2 was really close. It was, as you can see by the score, Top Esports actually, you know, was up, you know, 22 to 13 kills. It wasn't even that close. That, I will say, is very much misleading in terms of pressure. Rare Adam very much had pressure throughout most of the endgame here. And a lot of that was due to just how ridiculously strong Strive was here on this Corki. They could not fight. If there was any 5v5 that happened, Strive absolutely obliterated Top Esports, and that's why, you know, some people are going to be calling for iBoy to be player of the series here, and that I understand. iBoy did have a really good series, but for me, Strive is going to be the player of the series here on the Corki, basically just being a complete eliminator of team fights. When you got to these late games, it got to the point where there was just almost nothing you can do. Leon was a little bit worse here in game 2, but Tian wasn't much better, so there wasn't a ton of punishment. This was, I will say, on the side of top esports, Knight was kind of good, especially on the Victor. He had a really good game on the Victor. This felt like a 1v9 for Knight, and for that I feel a little bit bad for. Zoom had a decent game on the Kennen in game 1, but other than that, you know, Jackie Love was okay. He got a lot of resources early on the Ziggs and didn't really do anything with it. Zhuo was fine. Not a series you didn't really want to see out of top esports for sure, as, you know, the reigning champions of Demacia Cup, for them to fall 2-0 to a team that I didn't even have projected as a playoff team, I think is definitely not how you want to start your season. But props to Rare Adam. You know, like I said, that trio of Leon, Strive, and iBoy really carried them to a pretty solid series. Not that Cube played poorly or anything, he just didn't really have a huge impact on the series, and I was a little bit concerned with how Zora played, getting caught out a lot when he didn't really need to, but, you know, you can fix those things. You're just going to be happy that you're starting the year off with a 1-0 victory over one of the best teams in the region. Strive looked really, really good here, and that's definitely a plus. Obviously, replacing Fofo is no easy task, but if you can get, you know, a pretty good mid lane performance out of Strive here, he can link up with iBoy, you can have two really solid carries, and if Leon can continue where he kind of left off last year, this Rare Adam team could definitely be a lot better than I predicted, maybe even a playoff team, but definitely some worrying signs here from Top Esports, most notably in the jungle, for sure. Moving on to day 4, the back half of the week here, and the first series of day 4 was a good one with Ultra Prime taking on LNG Esports here. In a decently competitive series, especially game 1, Ultra Prime actually looked really, really competitive, but LNG taking the 2-0 series sweep. Here, let's talk about game 1. Game 1 was kind of interesting. Elk got ahead early because Hacker just kind of camped the lane, and Ultra Prime actually had a decent lead with how well the bot lane was actually playing. I want to give a huge, huge shout out to Xiaoxi on this Leona, who had a really, really solid game 1. Not as much in game 2, obviously, as I think we're aware, but a really, really solid game 1 here from Xiaoxi on the Leona. And then obviously a really good game 1 from Hacker here on the Xin Zhao as well, creating a lot of chances. They were ahead pretty late into this game, but then go for a fight around the top lane that they absolutely throw. It was a horrible idea. They basically throw the entire game. They get aced, they give up Baron, and LNG is now in firm control. Tarzan was really the one with all the gold in game 1. He's actually going to be my player of the series here for a couple of reasons, but that game 1 on Lee Sin was really the big one. He had a phenomenal game 1 on Lee Sin, and he was great. Light also did really well in those late game team fights on the Aphelios, as of course Aphelios will do if you give him the opportunity. Elk was really, really good in game 1 as well. Like I said, the bot lane for Ultra Prime was definitely the highlight of this team in my opinion. Game 2 was not as close. Elk still did pretty well early game. He kind of got schmooved on by Light in game 2 early on, though, on the Caitlyn, who had a pretty funny laning phase play. I would recommend you go look it up if you can find it, but really it just kind of was a macro difference, I would say, in game 2. A lot less clean. I'm not a huge fan of the game 2 draft here from Ultra Prime. The Blitzcrank Udyr is a very interesting duo. Hacker is notoriously bad on Udyr, though, so I'm not really sure why you go to this draft when Udyr is not even really that meta. I know I haven't really talked about Cryan, who is my dud of the series here, but, you know, he's quirky. He got caught out a lot, and he didn't really output as much damage as you would hope. He was really I think if he was able to really turn it on and become that late game hyper carry that Corki can be, I think the outlook of the series looks kind of different. I think they win game 1. I'm not saying that the game 1 teamfight loss was necessarily his fault, but he had given over a lot of gold to Ultra Prime, or to LNG, I should say, before that fight even happened. He was really the reason they were in that game in general, and then he really wasn't that strong on the Corki. So, Cryan, to me, is going to be your dud of the series. Not what you want to see, especially coming off of what was kind of a down Worlds, and kind of public opinion being a lot further down on him than maybe usual. This is not the way to show up at the beginning of the season when public opinion is down. But if you're looking for positives from both teams, Tarzan looked great, so did Light. Light looked really good. Lumao, I was a little bit questionable on. I'm still not sold that he is an upgrade to a Wandy, but, you know, obviously they like what they see out of Lumao, and they're going to run with him for a little bit of time. Doenby was a good support, you know, theoretically, this series. He didn't really do much. He was probably the least important member of this LNG team on his LNG debut, which is a little bit unfortunate, but it is what it is. And then, all you know, positives for Ultra Prime. The bot lane was really, really good. Hacker had a good game 1, and, you know, kind of facilitating Elk getting ahead. It really does feel like this is going to be an extension of what WE kind of was in the regular season last year, not so much in the playoffs, when they got better, but in the regular season last year, they were kind of, well, it's all on Elk to win his games, and Xiaoxi looked good in lane. If he can kind of translate that to making, you know, to not making stupid mistakes towards the end of the game like he did in game 2, it's going to be a lot better for Ultra Prime. So, overall, a solid win here for LNG. Not incredibly dominant, but Tarzan and Light looked really good. And then for Ultra Prime, they still do look like a team that has upside. Elk does still look really, really solid coming over here. And if they can kind of put some pieces together, if we can get the good Cryan that we saw in RNG last year, then Ultra Prime could definitely still be a contender. But a fun series nonetheless, and a good win for LNG. Moving on to our next series, and that was a series between Invictus Gaming and TT Gaming, Thunder Talk Gaming, that IG was able to take 2-0 in a pretty convincing sweep. This TT Gaming team just isn't very good, and I think IG might be better than some people are giving them credit for. Game 1 was pretty cut and dry. We got first blood for Zhao Yueji, and while TT has definitely kind of shown their hand at this point in the series, or in the season, I should say, they want to put a lot of attention bot lane early game. They want to give Puff and Southwind the options and the resources early game, it seems. At least Frigid has often been going bot lane pretty early. And while they do get some stuff, it's not really enough. And I'm not sure Puff and Southwind are the players that can really capitalize on those resources, at least, you know, as much as some other players on this team might be able to. So they kind of trade some resources early bot lane. And you end up getting this situation where IG just comes out ahead, and they kind of just snowball the game from there. Jun, like, pretty much had perma objective control throughout the entire series, but especially in game 1. I think he solo took Ocean Soul, which was nuts. Probably the easiest Ocean Soul take anybody's ever going to have. Just not really a lot of fight back here from TT. It very much felt like Invictus Gaming was just in the driver's seat, and then TT kind of just folded over and died. Game 2 was a little bit different. TT did get an early lead, but, you know, as we've seen a couple times already this year, they threw it. And while it wasn't this huge lead, 2k gold is still relatively good. I believe they were almost 3k gold up on Invictus at like 15 or 16 minutes. They end up throwing the game. A lot of that is due to how well Uakai played on the LeBlanc. Uakai is going to be my player of the series here for Invictus Gaming, and Nu is going to be my dud of the series here. He did pretty much nothing, and, you know, I really, I don't know what to say. Just not a good look from TT. They have one more series in the week that we're going to be talking about, but we did hear that they did go ahead and sign Chieftain and UCal like was projected. So they might be playing next week. They might be playing in week 3. I don't know how quickly they're going to want to get those two onto the Rift, but TT really is bleeding out right now. They don't have a ton of proactivity on the map. They really just seem to not know what to do in the mid game, and I think two more experienced players like Chieftain and UCal could make that a lot better, but a good win here for Invictus. They just were the better team overall. Jun and Uakai look like a good duo in the mid and jungle, and I'm pretty high on Zhao Yueji in the bot lane. I think he really could be a decent, you know, AD carry in the LPL. Lucas is still Lucas. You know, Invictus Gaming players play Rakan, and Lucas plays Rakan well, so that's Lucas. But yeah, other than that, not really too much to say about the series. It was pretty cut and dry. Invictus is the better team. A good series from Uakai, and not so good series from pretty much everybody on TT, especially like Frigid and Nu. Next up, we had the debut of the new Weibo Gaming team. If you don't count Demacia Cup at least, so the LPL debut of the new Weibo Gaming team, as they took on Team WE in a 2-0 win for Weibo. Game 1, let's talk about Game 1 because what a game. Probably one of the more fun games of the year to watch so far. I should also notice, if you watched my power rankings video and you're looking at that roster as compared to the WE roster right now, it's almost completely different. Both jungle mid and ADC I got wrong in my projections of who they were going to play. I think they probably got it right here, maybe with the exception of Beishang in the jungle, but Shanks is probably better than GA at this point, and Stay, I would say, is a little more experienced than someone like Jing. But overall, not too big of a change. I wouldn't move them up or down in my power rankings because of these changes. So just to get that out of the way. But Weibo with a really, really fun win in game 1. What a back and forth game. Both teams having gigantic leads that they throw at some point in the game. Shanks doing his absolute best to win the game for WE on this Corki late game. Absolutely obliterating team fights. I think he did over like 40,000 damage in that game. Looked really, really good on the Corki in game 1, but just barely wasn't enough to beat Weibo in a really, really close match. Game 2, a lot more cut and dry. Weibo wins. Huanfeng absolutely dominates on the Aphelios. He is going to be my player of the series here. He looks really good. We didn't see Sword Art in this series, and I'm not entirely sure why. Obviously, he played in Demacia Cup, so it's not a quarantine thing. For whatever the reason, they did go ahead with On, and On looked fine. He looked about as good as he did last year. So pretty decent, and Huanfeng looked a lot better than he did last year with On. A lot of people thought it was the chemistry between the two that was really the big problem for Huanfeng. I'm not so sure about that because he played really, 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 really well here. I think for him, it's a lot of confidence, and I think he has gotten his confidence back, at least going into the year. Hopefully he can maintain it, but yeah, like I said, he's going to be my player of the series. The Shy also looked really good on the Graves in this game, I should point out. Bubu is going to be my dud of the series here. He did almost nothing on Renekton in game 1, and then you're playing Sion into Graves. You're not going to have a good time in game 2. This is kind of the bad side of Bubu, where if he's not super ahead, he kind of just does nothing. And that's pretty much what happened. I'm not going to say he's the reason his team lost this series, but he certainly didn't help in the fact that he could have contributed a lot more. And if they would have gotten some good Renekton engages in game 1, there was a chance that they just end the game. And then obviously Sion into Graves in game 2 is a nightmare matchup, but either way, he got absolutely obliterated. So, a good win here for Weibo. Pretty much everybody on the team looked good. SOFM died maybe a little bit too much, but that's really the only, quote-unquote concern that you could have for this team. The Shy looks reinvigorated, or at least he looked a lot better in this series than he did pretty much at any point last year on Invictus. Hopefully he can get his mojo back. As for WE, Shanks looked really good, especially in game 1, and he was a big reason why this team did so well, especially in the playoffs last year. If Shanks can continue his development and growth, he could really be a carry for this team. Unfortunately, it looks like he doesn't have a ton of talent around him. Kadaya did not look good in this series, neither did Stay. Both will look better later in the week, but for WE, you're excited about how Shanks is playing, but you're a little bit concerned about how the rest of the roster is working out. And for Weibo, great win. Looks like Huanfeng has his confidence back, and it looks like you're probably getting a better version of the Shy than maybe you would have last year. So definitely a positive series here for Weibo. Moving on to the triple days, starting with day 5, the days where we're getting 3 games per day. It was kicked off by LGD Gaming taking on FunPlus Phoenix in what was a rather predictable series, and it ended up coming to fruition here. FPX does take it 2-0 here. Game 1 was interesting, but really, in a sentence you're probably going to be hearing a lot over the upcoming weeks. It was Corki diff. And that's really what it was. Gory late game was Corki, and he was absolutely obliterating the front line of LGD to the point where they really could not fight. They have, their comp in game 1 was really surrounded by a lot of peel and extended fights, but they were not able to get that with Corki. He was deleting the Braum and deleting the Xin and the Galio, really, just too quickly for anything to really happen. Zhao who played really well in game 1 as well here on the Jax, but he's going to be my player of the series, mostly for his play here in Game 2 on the Jace, where he was absolutely great. He was fantastic. Zhao and Gory really were the players of the series here, which is really good to see if you're an FPX fan, because they looked a little bit shaky in the earlier win against RNG. So for them to be able to come out and kind of win player of the series here, and really impress against, a much worse team here in LGD than RNG, but still a pretty, an LPL team, I think is a really, really good sign. So, yeah, Xiaolahu is going to be my player of the series. My dud of the series is going to be Yag here in the mid lane. Again, just didn't do anything. The Galio got completely shredded in game 1 by the end game. He was pretty much irrelevant. And in game 2, the Vex did almost nothing. You could have given the dud of the series to Shadow here as well, who kept trying to make plays and failing. Overall, I'm just not a huge fan of how LGD played in this series. I'm not a huge fan of the drafts. Game 1 draft, I think, is just way too passive. And, I don't know. I want more out of LGD. If you're going up against a team that's much better than you, I get the Ezreal Braum, you're going into LWX and Hang, one of the better bot lanes in the league, and you want to play safe here, but this is just a little bit too safe for me. It doesn't really do anything, and while Eric didn't play that bad, they accomplished almost nothing. Game 2 was pretty much nothing from the beginning. They never really seemed to have a ton of pressure on the map. I don't know, they just seemed really outclassed here by FPX. Not a great look for LGD, but you would kind of expect that if FPX is really going to be one of the top teams in the league, which, looking at it now, I could definitely believe that they are one of the top, 3 to 4 teams in the entire league. If you're getting a good Xiao Lao Hu, if he can continue to grow, if Gory can continue to be a teamfight monster on the Corki, and then LWX and Hang, if they can continue to be one of the better bot lanes in the entire world. You have Beishuan here, who did play well. I didn't really mention him, but he played fine in this series, but you're going to want to get Clid in here, and you're going to want to get Prime Clid in here. You could really be looking at a team that could contest for the LPL Championship, the LPL Trophy here in 2022. So, overall, a really good series here for FPX. Definitely not so much for LGD, though. Next up, we have the next series, which is Anyone's Legend taking on OMG, oh my god, in a 2-0 win for OMG here, who look really, really good at the beginning of the season. Both teams obviously going into this winning a series earlier in the week. Unfortunate loss here for Anyone's Legend, but OMG looks really, really solid. Game 1 was pretty even up until a point, up until Cream really just took over on the Akali. He is going to be my player of the series here, although I can definitely see why that might be a more contested thought after Game 2. But Cream is awesome. Cream is honestly better than I even imagined he would be at this point. He is going to be one of the better mid laners in all of the LPL this year. I will call my shot right now. He is fantastic. I think this top side of the map and this bot side, when they work, as we can see later in Game 2, I mean, this is actually going to be a really, really difficult team to beat. And we're seeing that right now. Even though they're beating up on some weaker teams, this is going to be a little bit of a scary team. But yeah, Game 1 was kind of close until Cream took over on the Akali. Game 2 was really back and forth. Both teams holding pretty big leads, but oh my god, Abel, if you don't know, used to be a Chinese pro that kind of played on the Korean server, and Faker and a bunch of other Korean pros would often accuse him of scripting because his orb walking mechanics are just so nuts. And that was perfectly on display here in this series. When you're talking about team fighting mechanics, just positioning, Abel is one of the best in the world, and he showed that on the Jinx in Game 2. Absolutely obliterating Anyone's Legend. A really, really solid series. You could absolutely give player of the series here to Abel for his Game 2 performance, and I would believe you. I want to give it to Cream because I think he played better across both games, but if you want to give it to Abel for just how good he was in Game 2, I wouldn't put it past you. Anyways, this Anyone's Legend team without Maple, who Maple is in quarantine, so Forge is coming into play a little bit for them, as we saw at the, we saw that in the first series as well. I don't think I mentioned it, but this team just looks a little bit lost. They don't really have a clear direction. Betty's not playing terrible. He's really the only player on this team, though, that isn't playing terrible. Chocho is going to be my dud of the series. He died a lot on this Leona. Pretty much, always engaging or getting caught out at unnecessary times. Obviously, he made some decent plays in the mid-game of Game 2, but overall, I would say Chocho is definitely the weak point right now for this Anyone's Legend team, and I'm very concerned about that. Hopefully, when Maple comes in, this team can shore things up, but after the first series of the week where it was just a complete clown fiesta, and then this series where they get, outskilled here by OMG at pretty much every level, I'm definitely worried about Anyone's Legend being anything better than a bottom 3 team. So, not a good look for Anyone's Legend, but a great look here for OMG, and especially for Cream and Abel, who look absolutely phenomenal as a carry duo. I should mention, Shanji and Aki looked really good this series as well as facilitators. Just nothing that Cream and Abel, they were going to steal the spotlight in Games 1 and Games 2 anyways with how well they played. So, a very, very solid win here for OMG for them to go 2-0. Our last series of Day 5 here is going to be JD Gaming taking on RNG, Royal Never Give Up, in a 3-game set that was very close in a sense, but also kind of not close in a sense. All 3 games were pretty well determined, but both teams showed good things in the series. RNG does end up taking it 2-1, we'll talk about Game 1 first. Game 1 was kind of boring. An easy 31-minute win here for RNG. They never really lost control, mostly due to Wei's jungle control. Kanavi, we've talked about it before. This Kanavi, when he's bad, is bad. And he was bad in Game 1. But Wei, did play well. I don't want to take everything away from Kanavi. Wei did play well in Game 1 and just kind of took over the map. RNG had complete control. Really easy win for them. Moving into Game 2, it was kind of the opposite. Kanavi had complete control in the jungle and really kind of took over the game. 369 also played really, really well. And those two players kind of linked up together to create a pretty easy win for JD. Gala tried his best there on the Aphelios, but couldn't really get much. And then moving into Game 3, it was another RNG win. This one a lot more convincing, mostly due to just how well Gala played. Gala, when he's ahead, is one of the better AD carries in the entire world. I am a little bit concerned about his laning phase overall, but Ming is such a good support, and Ming went kind of God mode in the series too. This bot lane was just really good. I know I praised LPC and Missing in their first series of the year, but they did look a little bit out of place in this one. Obviously, Kanavi didn't look great in Games 1 and 3, but he did look really good in Game 2, just like 369. But overall, I think my dud of the series is going to go to Missing here, just for never really creating a ton of proactive plays on the Leona. Kind of got abused by Gala as well in lane. So, just definitely a big plus there for the RNG bot lane. As you can probably tell, Gala is my player of the series here. He looked really, really good. Even in the game that they lost in Game 2, he actually was the reason that that game was even close in the first place, was just how well he was playing. Ming as well. I don't want to take away from Ming, but Gala really being the carry version of that. So, big plus here for Gala, and a very much needed win for RNG after their earlier loss to FPX. It's good to see them get a good bounce back here. You would have hoped it would have been a little bit more dominant against JD Gaming, who didn't look great at the beginning of the week, but still, a win is a win, and getting a win on the board is good for this team. JDG is not looking good to start the year. I'm definitely very concerned at this team's outlook as a playoff contender, because they just don't look it right now. And do I think that they, have the talent to get there? Absolutely. I think 369 is actually looking like the best member of this team, and LPC has shown some good things, but the rest of the team really has to step up if this team wants to still be competitive. And in Week 1, they definitely were not. So I'm a little bit concerned about JDG, but obviously losing a series to RNG isn't the worst thing in the world here. They were one of the better teams in the region last year, and basically only got better this offseason. So losing to RNG isn't a disaster. You just want to see more out of this JD Gaming team that you know is capable of more. But as for RNG, a very good series and a much needed series for Gala and Ming after what was a quiet first series of the year. Moving on to Day 6. Day 6 was kicked off by an absolute stomp of a series, which you probably could have expected with the two teams involved, but it is TT Gaming taking on EDG, Edward Gaming, probably the best team in the league, taking on probably the worst team in the league, and it was just about as dominant as you'd expect. There was never a point in the series where it was even halfway close, and that was pretty obvious from moment one. I don't know how to talk about these two games without talking about them together, so I'm going to talk about them together. This was a throttling. EDG looks just as good as they did at their best last year, which is a really, really good sign for this team. They look in sync, they look good. Xiao Shang actually was in the top lane here instead of Flandre. He looked fine. He was going up against my, one of my duds of the week here in New. But, still looked pretty good on the Gwen both games. My player of the series here is going to go to Viper in the bottom lane, who is just better than Puff and Southwind. That is as simple as I can make it. Mako made a really strong case for it as well, and so did Scout. But for me, Viper was just dominant on the Aphelios in both games. TT is the worst team in the league in this incarnation. Like I said, after these games, they did go ahead and sign Chieftain and UCal, and they will hopefully be coming in soon to make this team better, but as this team is constructed right now, this is easily the worst team in the LPL, and they definitely showed that in this series. I don't think any game that they have been in, not only have they not won any of their first 6 games, but I don't think any of them went past 30 minutes. They at no point looked even competent enough to play in the LPL, so very scary here for TT, but you're feeling real good if you're EDG here, just in general. I don't know, I want to extend this conversation out, but there's really not much to talk about. This was as clear-cut, as full throttle, as dominant as EDG has been in recent memory. Puff is going to be my dud of the series here. Could have gone to Southwind, could have gone to Captain, could have gone to Frigid. Really could have gone to anybody here on TT. Nobody played exceptionally well. It goes to Puff for constantly getting caught and just constantly getting killed. Not a good week for Puff here. Or I guess not a good game for Puff here. This is definitely the side of the map that TT wants to play for, and it's not working. Hopefully that's going to change when we get Chieftain and UCal. They're going to be more of a focus on this team, but right now, man, Puff and Southwind do not look like a very good bot lane, and that's, I guess, kind of what we expected going into the year. Yeah, EDG looks great, TT looks bad. I don't really know what else to say. What an absolute shellacking by EDG. Moving on to the second series of day 6 here, and that is going to be Top Esports taking on Ultra Prime in a decently competitive series here. One you would hope would be a little bit more in favor of TES, but honestly, Ultra Prime might get a little overlooked in terms of how well they played in this series. Let's talk about it. Game 1, TES win, Xiao Peng and Jackie Love. Yes, Xiao Peng is in for Tian this series, and I don't know if Tian is going to get that spot back. I don't know what the problem with Tian is, whether that be his wrist issues, you know, whatever the issue is with Tian, he's got to get that figured out. But if Xiao Peng plays like this for the entire year, he's just going to keep that spot because he looked really good here. Game 1 on the Nidalee was fantastic. Jackie Love doing Jackie Love things in all 3 games, I will say. But the good ones in Game 1, especially here on the Aphelios, he looked really solid. Game 2 was an Ultra Prime win, and this one you could chalk up to TES kind of playing a little poor. Xiao Peng I still think played pretty well here in Game 2. Still had a decent amount of jungle control, but really, the big story of Game 2 is just how freaking good is Ultra Prime's bot lane. They actually could sneakily be one of the better bot lanes in the entire LPL, because they looked great. Like I said, Jackie Love doing Jackie Love things in this game, but this one, more for the negative here on the Ezreal. A pentakill for Elk was really nice. A lot of that was set up by how good Xiaoxi was this entire game as well. So big shout out to how well Elk and Xiaoxi are playing. They were a big reason why this team won in Game 2. And then in Game 3, you know, just a more solid, a more standard TES win from the get-go. Jackie Love looking a lot better on the Ezreal in lane with the Braum to protect him. And then the Lee Sin to kind of help out. Overall, I think this was a really solid win here for Top, one that they definitely needed after losing their first series of the year 2-0. I think getting a win here over Ultra Prime is good, although if you're an Ultra Prime fan, I should say, I would not be too worried here. I think your bot lane looks fantastic, and just because I think Hacker here is the dud of the series for getting out jungled by Xiao Peng, which he absolutely did, just because he's the dud of the series doesn't mean I don't think Hacker, you know, has some upside. I think if your mid-jungle duo can really turn it around and really become a little more consistent, and you still get this really solid bot lane performance, I think Ultra Prime could definitely still be a playoff team, and a dangerous playoff team at that. But for Top Esports, this is a really good showing. Xiao Peng, like I said, should probably stay in. He looked really good here. Knight and Zoom were kind of the carries of the first series, the reason they were in it, at least. And then in the second series here, it was Jackie Love and Zhuo that looked really solid in the bot lane here. Jackie Love is, of course, going to be my player of the series. He was doing nut stuff both in Game 1 and in Game 3. Pretty much everything you like about Jackie Love was shown off here in this series. So, a really solid win here from Top. You like seeing it out of Jackie Love, even though you still got the inconsistent parts here in Game 2. Zhuo looked a lot better. If he and Jackie Love can, you know, continue that synergy that they were growing on last year, that's going to be really good. And then Xiao Peng is a big plus. And as for Ultra Prime, Elk and Chelsea looking really good. Crying and Hacker, you definitely want to step up, but this team's season is definitely not over just from a loss like this from going 0-2. I think as soon as they start playing some less tough teams, they've had a really rough start to the year, but when they start playing some teams more around their level, I think we're really going to see how good this team can actually be, and I'm excited to see what that looks like. Moving on to the final series here of Day 6, and it was a really fun one to watch. It was LNG Esports taking on Rare Atom, two teams who had really shown at the beginning of the year, and LNG takes a very narrow 2-1 series win. So let's talk about Game 1 first. It was a pretty traditional Rare Atom win. They looked really good in the win, especially Strive on that Corki. Whenever he gets that Corki pick, he actually looks to take over games. Strive was someone who I really wasn't super familiar with, and I was kind of mixed on his tape in the LDL, but he's coming in here to Rare Atom this year, and at least in Week 1, he's looking very, very comfortable on one of the power picks in the meta right now, which is a very dangerous statement to make. He was a huge reason why Rare Atom won this Game 1. Overall, just a really good series here in general from Strive, but especially their win in Game 1. Game 2 was kind of the opposite. It was a pretty clean LNG win here. Domenb and Tarzan looking really, really good as a duo. Both of them are pretty goated in general, but we'll get to why more so in Game 3. A really solid Game 2 here. Tarzan just kind of taking over on the Xin Zhao. Complete jungle control, complete map control. Out jungling Leon at pretty much every stage, but Tarzan does that pretty regularly, so it's not too much of a shock, I think, to anybody who's used to Tarzan. But Tarzan and Domenb looking really, really good, like getting a lot of damage out. And then, oh boy, Game 3. Game 3 was interesting. The fact that LNG won this game is absurd. RA had a huge lead, about 5k gold. They coin flip a Baron, Tarzan steals it, and from there on, the game is just LNG. And it's absolutely absurd. Tarzan played this Game 3 basically perfectly after like 25-30 minutes. And RA did everything they could to lose the game. And a big part of that is going to be on my dud of the week here in Zora on the Leona, who did absolutely nothing. I'm not even sure he hit an ultimate in the entire game. It was not a good series here from Zora. And if you were an RA fan, honestly, everybody on this team is outperforming expectations, especially Strive and iBoy, who look really good. And then Leon, while he wasn't great in this series, he's shown good things in the past. And Cube top lane isn't a negative. Zora has for sure been a negative for this Rare Atom team. I'm very concerned about their chances of being an actual good LPL team with Zora on the team. But even with that, 4 really solid players here, this Rare Atom team is going to be a lot better than what I projected them to be at the beginning of the year. That is for sure. But LNG here, a solid win. Tarzan looking like an absolute monster. There's a reason that this guy is considered maybe the best jungler in the world right now. And he showed that off in this series, really being a catalyst for their big series comeback in Game 3. Domenb doing a lot of damage on the Corki in those team fights, but they were never going to win those team fights without the gold swing that Tarzan's macro got them. So overall, a really, really good series here for LNG. Like I said, I don't think I said this, but Tarzan is the player of the series. That should have been obvious from how I was talking about it. Overall, a really, really good series here for LNG. And a good one from Rare Atom, too. They had a really solid team. One of the teams that people consider to be an LPL contender this year on the ropes, and they really should have beaten them. So while you're upset as a Rare Atom fan that they couldn't close out on this series, you are really, really excited that you were able to hang with a team like LNG. And it's a good sign for Rare Atom going into the future that they're probably a lot better than I had expected. But overall, really, really fun series here. Would recommend you go watch it if you haven't seen it yet. But God, Tarzan's so good. That brings us into our final day of LPL Week 1 here, Day 7. And we kick that off with a game between OMG and Invictus Gaming. Another really solid win here for OMG. And another really convincing win that shows off just how good these players really are. Game 1 was, it kind of went long and they had a little bit of trouble closing it out, but it was never really in jeopardy here. A really interesting team comp here. You'll love seeing the Talon come out for Aki here in Game 1. It definitely took Invictus off guard, and the Talon did a lot of work in Game 1, at least in terms of macro pressure. But really the big star of Game 1 had to be Cream here again on the Corki, who, if you get this guy to 20-25 minutes on Corki, he is going to win you the game. He's my player of the series. I'll talk about game 2, which was, you know, a little bit... He was great in game 2 as well on the Victor, but the spotlight was a little bit stolen by somebody else on the team. But Cream might actually be one of the top 5 mid laners in the LPL. And I know that sounds like an absurd statement to make, but he has come out in 2022 with an absolute vengeance. And he's looked phenomenal. I mean, he's looked great. And you know, there's not really much else to say about how good Cream has been. Just know that this is a guy who was really good last year as a rookie, and he has gotten much better going into 2022. This is a name to really keep an eye on as a potential breakout MVP candidate here in the LPL. A really, really good start to the year for Cream. Game 2 was shorter, a little bit closer, ironically enough, but just a dirty, dirty team comp from OMG here. Tank Gragas and Yuumi is unkillable. It's completely undealable with. And Shanji really showed that off. He was fantastic on the Gragas in game 2. He did like 10k damage in 23 minutes on Tank Gragas. It's absolutely absurd. The Yuumi on him meant he just never died. Abel played really well too. I don't want to take that away from him. And Cream still played really well on the Victor, but I mean, it was just really disgusting watching this Gragas walk around with the Yuumi on his back and just actually never be able to die no matter what happens. So yeah, on the Invictus Gaming side, not really too much to talk about. There wasn't a lot of good in this series. Jun is going to be my dud of the series. He lost jungle control as a Xin to a Talon, which is pretty bad. It really shouldn't happen, especially when Talon's not, like, hyper-fed, because he wasn't. So, not so good there. Also, didn't really create anything. Invictus was really behind on every single play that happened in this game. I don't really remember a time where OMG was really on the ropes at any point. And so, Jun just not really doing his job as a jungler, especially when you have that kind of early game, just pure damage and taking this advantage, like dueling advantage on the Xin Zhao. To kind of lose jungle control there, I think is definitely a little frustrating, but you bring out the Vayne in game 1, it really doesn't work that well. IG was just outclassed in this series, and while I do think that there is a lot of upside to take from the roster in general, from Yuukai, Zhao Yueji, Jun, Neni, you know, these are all players that I expect to grow. They definitely did not show it here in this series, but a huge win for OMG. They look phenomenal. Cream looks phenomenal. Shanji looks phenomenal. Abel looks phenomenal. This team actually could be sneakily very, very good. Yes, they're beating up on the lower tier teams, but that's what you have to do if you want to be a playoff team in the LPL. You have to consistently be able to beat these lower tier teams. They walk into week 1 with the most series of any team in the league. They walk into 3 series. They are 3-0, 6-0 in matches. They haven't lost a single game yet. They look very deadly and could be one of the surprise teams to look out for going into the rest of 2022. Moving on to our second game of day 7 here, our second series, and that was Team WE taking on Victory 5, making their season debut here. A really fun 3-game set that saw Victory 5 win it 2-1 to kick off their season here. Wow, just an interesting series overall. We'll talk about game 1. Game 1 was pretty in favor of Victory 5 the entire time. A lot of that was due to the dominance of PP God's Nautilus. Our Lord and Savior PP God's Nautilus was phenomenal in game 1, creating so much pressure for this V5 team all across the map. Absolutely dominating. A really, really good showing here for PP God. He's going to be my player of the series, but that might be contested. Not necessarily because everybody else on the team played great, but because PP God made some weird plays in game 3, but a really good game 1 win here. Really, really confident win for V5 to kick off their season. Game 2 was definitely kind of the opposite. It was basically the exact opposite of what had happened in game 1. It was actually WE's bot lane that were looking really, really good. Kadaya on the Rakan was actually a really good pick for him, and I would expect to see them go to it a lot more in the coming weeks if he is going to look like this. Compared to what he looked like on Leona, it was basically night and day. A very good game from Kadaya, and Stay in general as well on the Aphelios. Played really well in game 2 for the WE win, but in game 3, it was all Rookie and Karsa, the 2 new big acquisitions for Victory 5 that kind of propelled them to win. Rookie on that Zoe is just disgusting. It's one of those picks that globally you just have to be aware of it. Rookie Zoe is disgusting, and I'm not sure there are many other mid laners that actually would have won this game. other than Rookie. And I got a lot of criticism for putting Rookie still in the top 3 in terms of mid laners in the LPL, but I think this game shows exactly why I say that. He can win games by himself. That's not to say the rest of his team played poorly. Karsa on the Jarvan in Game 3 was super duper impressive, a big reason why they won as well. Invincible played really well in the Gragas. And then PP God on the Thresh, missing 2 wards in a row in the bush. He tried to place a ward in the bush twice, missed twice in a row, and then hit a blind hook that essentially sealed the game for them. So, the pluses and the minuses of PP God, I'll take 2 missed wards for a blind hook that ends up winning the game. So, a really, really good series here from PP God. Like I said, he is my player of the series, even though he had some weird goofs and gaffs ups and wasn't especially fantastic in Game 2. He still overall was, I think, a positive for the team. You could have given it to Rookie. I think Rookie deserved it as well. I just thought PP God had a better Game 1 than Rookie did, and they both had good Game 3s. So, and then for WE, I was really thinking about who to make the dud of the series here. For me, it was really between Bubu and View. I really could have given it to View. View didn't play especially well. He got really out-jungled in Game 3 on the Nidalee, a pick that you really want to hyper-accelerate on, and it just didn't happen. But ultimately, the whole point of drafting the Nidalee was to make Bubu strong on the Renekton. It didn't happen. Invincible played really well in the top lane, and Bubu couldn't get ahead. So Bubu is my dud of the series here. He didn't play particularly well on the Gwen or the Gragas either. The Gragas game was a lot better, I should say, but the Gwen game, not entirely. So, yeah, he's going to be my dud of the series here for WE. A decent series, you know, staying competitive with Victory 5 is a good thing, but they really weren't ultra competitive in Games 1 or 3. It was really just Game 2, so... overall, a good win for Victory 5. Karsa, Rookie, and PP God, your big acquisitions this offseason, are looking really good. Invincible, I believe, is just playing for Rich because of quarantining on imports. But, you know, if he continues to play, he might actually be better than Rich. Because he played pretty well in this series, and as everyone knows, I'm not that high on Rich. I think he was a hindrance to Nongshim last year and not a benefit. So, if Invincible continues to play like this, I think there's a real world in which you could just say that he is going to be the better top laner. 4v5, either way, a good series here for Victory 5. Everybody looked good, and it's definitely a good way to start your season. And finally, we can jump into the final series of the week here, and it was the debut of BLG taking on Weibo Gaming here. A really, really fun series here. Game 3 was exceptionally fun to watch, but overall, just a really, really fun series in general. A lot of really fun players to watch. You'll notice I use that word a lot. That, to me, is more important than the game necessarily being played perfect. I would much rather have a fun game than a perfectly played one, and these games were fun for sure. Game 1 went entirely the way of Weibo. The Shy's Gwen is absolutely schnasty. He really looks like the best version of himself coming into Weibo here this year. Definitely a big plus here for Weibo if they're going to be getting, you know, the best version of the Shy. He looked it in Game 1. Absolutely destroyed Breathe, who was on the Gragas. The Breathe being one of the top laners in the in the league last year. One of the top laners. I think I said that poorly. One of the top laners in the league last year. The Shy absolutely obliterated him on the Gwen in lane, en route to a pretty easy win for Weibo. I will say, Game 1 was held together a little bit by Weiwei on the Talon, who got really far ahead. His Talon actually looked really deadly. This isn't a pick I'm particularly excited about, but if you're going to pick Zed into it, you really have to do something, and you didn't. I'm not a fan of the Zed pick. I've been very vocal about that on this channel in the past. I think Zed jungle just isn't that good in the meta right now, especially, and we saw that against the Talon. It got completely out-jungled. And then you move into Game 2. A nice BLG win, bounce back here. Crisp is so freaking good, isn't he? This bot lane honestly played really well in Game 2 here on the Jhin Leona. It was a really, really solid performance. I know people want to see Uzi. And we can talk about Doggo in Game 3 a little bit, but Crisp looked really good in Game 2. Game 2 is a big reason why he's going to be my player of the series here, although he had a really good Game 3 as well. Fofo played really well in Game 2 on the LeBlanc. Overall, just a really solid win for BLG. And then Game 3 was, again, a really solid win for BLG, kind of carried by Fofo Zoe, which really just took over the map. Was really, really difficult to push into. Their macro in Game 3 was phenomenal. I want to give a huge, huge shout out to Weiwei for this series. He played really, really well and was really close to getting my player of the series here, but Weibo played really, really well. He's actually the member of this BLG team that I was the least sure about going into 2022. He's definitely showing me why that's not valid, because he looked really solid in this series. Doggo obviously getting a little bit troll in game 3 here, that teleport on the 6 late game, but I think he's getting a little too much hate. He had a really solid game in terms of just damage, output. His ultimates were great. He took a ton of towers. His pressure, pushing waves, was really important to the macro of this BLG team, and that really was what sealed game 3, was the macro. So, you know, while Doggo made some really questionable plays, he also was a big reason why they were in a good spot to begin with. But yeah, just a really good series here from BLG. Crisp is looking fantastic, looking like one of the best versions of himself, like last year's Crisp. Fofo and Weibo look like they have really good chemistry together, which is really good to see, because they're going to need it if they want to be one of the best teams in the league. My dud of the series here is going to be SOFM, who just didn't have any sort of jungle control at all in the series. He was really outclassed by Weibo. Even in the game that they won, in game 1, he was outclassed on the Zed. Just not a good series here from SOFM. You're going to want more out of him. But you do have positives from Weibo here. The Shy looked really solid in game 1. So did Angel. Angel looked pretty good in game 1 on the Victor as well. Not so much on the Akali and the LeBlanc. But the control mages for Angel have always been kind of his bread and butter. Huanfeng, while not having as good a series as he did earlier in the year, wasn't horrible. On, not great. Kind of got abused by Crisp. Crisp just had the ward control over the entire map. On was a big reason why Weibo didn't really have any sort of vision in the entire game. So say what you want about On, but his vision wasn't necessarily great in game 3 especially. And then overall, just, you know, Weibo was fine. Positives were the solo lanes, but negative takeaways were maybe some of the more proactive positions like jungle and support. For BLG, everybody on this team looked pretty good, with the exception of Brave, who didn't really get his, like, big moment to shine. He didn't necessarily do anything poorly. He was just really the only player who didn't necessarily, like, stand out, but everybody else on this team looked really, really solid, and it's a great way to kick off the year if you're BLG with a win. And that is going to do it for my Week 1 LPL analysis. Here are the power rankings part of the video. Up on the screen right now, you can see the current LPL standings on the left. If there are teams that are tied in terms of overall games and match games, then it will just be sorted alphabetically. So like FunPlus being above LNG, it's just FunPlus is alphabetically before LNG. That's really the only difference. My power rankings are going to be on the right-hand side, and you are going to see where people rise and fall according to last week and this week. So the biggest risers this week, it's actually a tie, a two-way tie between OMG rising up to 9th place after their 3 in a week, and Rare Atom rising up to 11th after a really solid win over Top. The biggest faller is obviously going to be Top Esports. They were number 2 in my preseason power rankings. They're going to fall all the way to 6. I don't want to drop them too much further than that right now because it's still very early in the season. And the last thing I want to do is overreact to some changes here. JD Gaming also being a notable faller, falling from 9 to 12 in my power rankings. But my stud of the week, my player of the week, as you probably could guess from hearing me talk about him, is going to be Cream on OMG. He is my player of the week. My dud of the week is going to go to New on to Thunder Talk, because New just was not very good. He got abused in that first series and really had no impact in the second one. So my player of the week is Cream. My dud of the week is New. Hopefully TT won't be as bad next week, but yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, go ahead and leave a like. I will be doing these every single week. So if you guys are excited for that, go ahead and leave a like. Leave a comment if you guys disagree with anything that I have said. I hope you are having a wonderful day. I hope you continue to have a wonderful day, and I will see you all later.